We are 4 sessions into England's very busy year of Test match cricket ahead. 17 Test matches, potentially 18 if they get through to the final of the World Test Championship. But as it stands, this is what they're looking to go up against. Obviously, they're in Sri Lanka at the moment for the 2 Tests. Then they go to India for 4 Tests, probably playing New Zealand for 2. India at home for 5, and then down to the Ashes for 5. First things first, Nas, that's a daunting schedule for players, management, coaches, captain.
Well, it is. After this series, it's the top 3 above them in that Test Championship. It's India, Australia, New Zealand. New Zealand, the #1 ranked side, albeit they haven't played much away from home recently, New Zealand. And also, if you ask any England captain, where are the 2 places that is an absolute nightmare away from home to win? They will say Australia, definitely. You're looking at 1 here. You're probably looking at 2, actually. Australia, definitely, and India, definitely. Who won out there? Gower won, and Cook won on that trip when Peterson and Cook and Trott and everyone played brilliantly. So, and Strauss won in Australia. But in general, and they've got 9, they've got 4 in India, 5 at home against India, and then the Ashes. So not only is it the amount of cricket, but it is tricky, difficult cricket, and it will test every one of those England cricketers, and more importantly, their captain.
And the selectors too, given that some of it, maybe all of it, will be potentially in biosecure environments. Bubble fatigue.
It's one of the advantages England have over, say, a country like Sri Lanka. If you're talking resources, human and financial, England have the advantage there. They have enough money to put on these biosecure bubbles, as we saw in England last summer, got all 18 international games away. And of course, with the professional structure of over 18 counties, 400 odd professional players, there's plenty to choose from, whereas, say, West Indies or Sri Lanka might not have that number of top quality players to choose from. When you're playing international cricket across 3 formats with such a busy calendar year, having those human resources is important. But you've essentially got 2 different forms of Test cricket. You've got Test cricket at home in England with a Duke's ball when the ball nibbles around and moves sideways. And it's not guaranteed that England will win at home, but you can be damn sure they're going to be very competitive and they know exactly what they're about. The question that Nasser poses is exactly right. Then how do you go about changing your side, changing the balance of your attack? A, for India, where generally spin wins, although it's a question we should ask because some teams have done it a different way. South Africa, who were successful a bit in Asia when we played in the 1990s, backed their pace bowlers. They didn't really have, I'm trying to think of their spinners. Nicky Bowyer bowled a bit.
Paul Adams.
But they did well without top-class spinners, and they did back their seamers and the reverse swing and drying it up and used a different method. And then to the Ashes, to Australia, where traditionally history suggests if you're going to win the Ashes down under, you have to have some pace. You go right back to Larwood in Bodyline, Tyson and Statham, 54, 55, John Snow, 71. And the anomaly a little bit is Andrew Strauss's side in 2010-11 in a cool, damp summer, where they went with a different strategy. They went by drying it up. If you remember, Stephen Finn did quite well, their quickest bowler, but then they discarded Finn after a couple of Test matches, went to Bresnan, who with Anderson and Broad, and they bowled very kind of tightly. But it was a different summer. It was quite a cool, wet summer, and history suggests you need to have a bit of pace.
That was Broad's point. Broad keeps getting asked, Broad and Anderson, how long can they continue? Will you make the Ashes? Are you quick enough? Have we got enough pace to win the Ashes? And Broad recently made a very valid point. Well, hold on, have a look at the batsmen. When we won in 2010-11, it was the runs we got. If you get 450, 500 in your first innings, then your bowling attack has always got something to play with. You're in the game. If in Australia or India, because you are used to just getting 350 in your first innings, that's not enough. And if you look at, that's the template. Let's be honest, for me, that was one of the great tours, one of the great wins, home or away from home from an England side, was Strauss's side. And you look at the bowling, there is not a lot of pace, but there's variety in there. There's Finn with pace, Tremlett with height, swing with Anderson, and a world-class finger spinner in Graham Swan, which gave him control and wickets. But really, Broad's point and mine is if you get him, I've nicked it off Broad, if you can get him in your first innings and if you can get big scores, look at the batting averages. So when you go to India and when you go to Australia, English cricketers have a mindset, because they play with the Duke's ball in England, where 350 is a good score. First innings, batting at Lords, batting at Edgbaston. If you go with that mindset, you are, they played in Chennai, I don't know what they got, but then they went out to field under Cook, and Karun Nair got 300.
400, but India got 700.
700,
yeah. So it's that mindset of you get 350, you're in the game. You're not. The first Ashes test on the last tour, England were going well. They had that Vince run out, and then you end up under par. So get your runs in the first innings. But I do believe they need to have an X factor with the ball, especially in Australia. I do believe you need pace. You need Archer, Wood, you need Stone. You need someone, just when the Kookaburra ball goes flat and it's doing nothing, Root throws the ball and say, just give me something.
There are two sides to every coin, though, as well. And it depends a little bit on the opposition. I mean, that was a fantastic performance from Andrew Strauss's side. To win 3 test matches by an innings in Australia is unheard of, really. But I would say that was not, in that particular era, that particular year, that was not the strongest Australian side that England have played against. Now, Australia's attack for this coming, if they all stay fit, Stark, Hazelwood, Cummings in particular, with Lyon to back it up, that is a top-class attack.
And now you've got Green as well.
Yeah, Green, who looks a Cumming cricketer. Yeah, that's a much better attack than the one, for example, that England faced in 2010-11. And this current collection of Indian cricketers as well. India are a top-class side, both batting and seam bowling. And with Ashwin and Jadeja.
You mentioned, can I just come back to you on fitness as well and players staying fit? The other thing that stood out for me in that graphic is that I know they chopped and changed with Finn, and Bresnan played 3 and Finn 2, Broad 3, whatever. They all stayed fit. Anderson played all 5 tests, Swan played all 5 tests, and that is going to be an enormous challenge before they get to, say, Australia.
Well, the Australian series is coming at the end of this year that you've mentioned. They've got 17 test matches, but not just 17 test matches. There's a whole load of white ball cricket as well. There's got a World T20 in India, which England are focusing in on. If they're focusing on 2 areas this coming year, it's test matches and 20-over cricket. The 50-over cricket, they're slightly going to push to one side because the World Cup is not until 2023. So they're focusing in on those 2 areas. But, for your key players like Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer and others, they're multi-format players, Josh Buttler, they're going to be wanting to play in the World T20 before the Ashes. So I know that Joe Root and Chris Silverwood have put a lot of work in, and they've been working quite hard with the nutritionists and the physios and the S&C guys to say, how can we get to November at the end of this incredibly long and arduous year and make sure that our cricketers are ready to go for the Ashes at the end of this year?
Well, if I'm playing against England, if I'm an Indian coach or an Australian coach, I would ask for the groundsman to produce good, not flat as in 600, 700 pitches, just good batting pitches. And that's when England's area of concern, their nemesis, if it's not doing it for Anderson and Broad and Wokes, and the spin department is lean. I know Bess has just got Pfeiffer, but let's be honest, it's not the strongest spin department that we've ever had. Then it's an England captain's trying to work out how to get 20 wickets. If it's like, why have they won in South Africa recently? Why have England got a good record in South Africa away from home? Is because the ball does a bit in South Africa. It swings, the Wanderers it goes through. So Wood and Archer were quite brilliant out there. Anderson has bowled, Hoggard has bowled well out there, so it does something. Even in India, that time they changed and Dhoni got it to spin in Mumbai, it brought Swan and Panesar. So if it spins, I think England can play because it gives decent spinners, it makes them better spinners. And if it's got a bit of carry and bounce, Broad, Anderson, Archer, etc. It's when it's flat and not doing a lot and it's no sideways movement, that's when England need to find that X factor bowler that Australia produce. It is, and then that's when your batsmen need to go big and get 150s and double hundreds.
There's a little bit, sorry to interrupt, a bit of a difference between, we talk about pace down under, and I think pace is important. England will have Jofra Archer, Mark Wood, Ollie Stone. They're going to try and get a phalanx of pace bowlers there. So Archer, Wood, Stone, probably Ollie Robinson. You're looking at Broad and Anderson. There's 6. I don't know whether they'll take Broad and Anderson, but if they get through to the end of the year, they might. I think the key thing in Australia, though, is not so much the speed through the air. It's actually hitting the pitch hard. I think I've always found that a slight difference between England bowlers and Australian bowlers. England bowlers, because of the kind of movement that you get from the Duke's ball, you kind of look to kiss the surface here in England. You bowl a slightly fuller length and kiss the surface and get it moving. Whereas in Australia, on those day 3, 4, 5 pitches, what unevenness you get is up and down bounce, and to hit the pitch hard. So you want bowlers who are quite kind of physically strong and able to really hammer the pitch on a length. It's not just the speed through the air, but it's the kind of energy with which you put the ball into the surface.
Well, I've not been flippant with the challenges that face England on this trip to Sri Lanka, despite the fact that they're in a very strong position at lunch on day 2. But let's deal with specifically with the India challenge in India. If those pitches are, as you say, you would ask the groundsman to...
Well, they're going to be in Ahmedabad and Pune.
Chennai spins.
Yeah.
We know that from IPL. We know Chennai. It's not a raging. It was a good pitch there. 400, 600 last time. So that's a pitch that I would be concerned about.
Ahmedabad's new and a day-night game.
Yeah, and they've got there. I was reading up about it, and I text Harsha Bogli actually. They've got 8 different surfaces out the back. From the red soil.
They don't play the cricket out the back.
No, but they can bring these surfaces in, and they've got red soiled right to the green top that they want, because now they've got a variety in their attack. It's not the old India where you went there and it was Harbhajan and Kumble and they hit you with spin, and the new ball bowlers were sandpaper bowlers to get the shine off. Now they've got Bumrah, they've got Shami, they've got Yadav, they've got a whole host who are playing in this Test match. So they've got the seam option. But they've also, Jadeja, I think, might be injured for that first test. He's just done that thumb, hasn't he, or finger. So they'll definitely have Ashwin, whose record against left-handers in particular is phenomenal.
The third one is the day-nighter, isn't it? The third of 4, I think, which, who knows what a day-night game will produce.
The interesting thing about India is there's a myth, I think, that India are great players of spin. There were an Indian side and a generation that were. Shane Warne didn't get many wickets in India because of Ganguly, Dravid, Tendulkar, Sehwag and VVS Lachman. You look at how Moeen has bowled against India. Moeen has had a lot of success against India, albeit in England. There's some real odd things about when you play against India. You think they're great players of spin, and yet at times they don't look that. So you mustn't rule out your spinners. They've got a massive role to play. Of course they do. But I think what's going to be vital is how England batsmen are playing spin as well. At some stage it is going to spin, and you're going to come up against Ashwin or Jadeja or whoever they pick. And that's why this series is a good signs. Bairstow's a good player of spin. Joe Root is an exceptional player of spin.
Lawrence looks a
good player of spin. Zach Crawley in that double 100 he got. So the playing of spin is absolutely vital.
If he's looking for X-factor bowlers then for England, and say Kohli does go along the lines of making them, reasonably good batting surfaces, they're not going to rag square. What are England's X-factor bowlers, both for India and Australia? Archer with his pace, but you can't plug him in from one end and bowl 40-odd overs in the day. So what are you looking at in terms of the...
For Australia, your quicker bowlers. We mentioned 5 or 6 there that they're going to have their eye on. They're hoping to get them all fit and ready to go for the start of the Ashes. So you've got Archer and Wood and Stone, who are quicker than most of the other England bowlers. You've got Broad and Anderson, obviously, who are great England opening partnership, new ball partnership. I think they like Ollie Robinson. And there'll be maybe 1 or 2 others that emerge, but you're looking at a combination of 6 there, and they're not going to play all those Test matches. They're going to mix and match, but they're going to have some pace probably in every game that they look to play. India, the spin options are not as varied because Adil Rashid, his shoulder, I don't think is up to first-class cricket. That's what he says, that whether they want Adil Rashid to be available or not, it looks like he's not going to be available and not going to play. You're left with Bess and Leach, and then the 3 reserves at the moment in Sri Lanka are Parkinson, Crane and Verdi, who are all pretty inexperienced. You've got one test cap there between those three, and that was a pretty expensive test cap for Mason Crane some years ago now in Sydney. So that's more of an issue for England, and that is a reflection on the domestic cricket that we play, which is at the front end and back end of the season on juicy pitches, and is not conducive for producing spinners at home. So that's a more fundamental issue that isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Well, let's talk about who England will be up against, the opponents. They're locking horns as we speak now at the Gabba, Australia and India. Where are India at as a test side, would you say? What challenges will they pose for Joe Root and his team, both in India and then when they come here?
Huge challenges. They're a world-class outfit. I think this series actually would have done them a lot of good. They're not a side to be bullied anymore. Some of the scenes we've seen from Australia, but both on and off the field, you know, don't bully an Indian side. They go like that. They go tight. Kohli, Rahane now as captain has taken over from Kohli. They're still a very good batting lineup. And in fact, this series, because of all those injuries, it's given other opportunities to other lads, given them a bit of experience. So they, going back to Michael's point, they have got a massive pool. If everyone becomes fit, available, and it's pretty close, you know, we're only, what, February the 5th or something? The Test match starts in Chennai, so we're not that far away. So these Indian cricketers have got to get fit. Their problem might actually be more bubble life. A lot of them have been in that bubble since August. I read somewhere the other day they're on medication at the moment in Brisbane. They're not netting. It might sound a bit dramatic and over the top, but you imagine being in a bubble since August because you had pre-IPL bubbles.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve Smith said he'd been 150 days in a bubble. He went from the stuff in England straight to the IPL, straight back to Australia.
Yeah.
And then there was that issue in Sydney, wasn't there, the Northern Beaches? Yeah. And I think that was the point at which he was going to see his wife for the first time in like 150 days, and then suddenly he couldn't. It is an issue. And that's going to be a significant factor throughout the next few months until we get through this issue.
Right, what about Australia then? We know if the seam bowlers stay fit and then you add in Nathan Lyon, that's a very, very potent attack. But what about the batting side?
Very interesting, their batting. I think Smith and Labuschagne are fabulous players. I'm a huge fan of Labuschagne. I think he's going to be a thorn in England's side for many years to come. The big question mark is about Warner at the moment, who obviously had a poor Ashes in England, has been a bit injured down under and is not getting a whole heap of runs.
Well, he has sort of come out about the bubble life and saying it is unsustainable and I've got to give my family something back.
I think Labuschagne and Smith are bankers for them. If they've got another banker in Warner, then three of your top five with Cameron Green, who looks a good all-rounder at 6, that's pretty strong. But if there's a question mark about Warner and you can get into the opening partnership with England's new ball bowlers and you suddenly get a crack at Labuschagne and Smith early, then that's a different issue. So I think Warner is a vital player for them.
And I'll tell you what, there is a question mark over Warner in that Archer's got the wood on him. You ask Jofra Archer now who's your favourite batsman to bowl at.
In Australia with a Kookaburra ball, is that any different?
In anywhere in the world, in this studio, bowling with any kind, with an orange against David Warner. David Warner does not fancy Jofra Archer at the moment, and Archer fancies Warner. That will be a battle to look forward to.